Welcome, Cali, to the Happier at Work podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to have you here as my guest today. I heard you on a podcast probably 6 or 7 months ago at this stage. I won't say that the pandemic was new. It wasn't. It certainly wasn't relatively new at that stage. And you were talking about remote working and what that actually means. And I thought, wouldn't that make for an absolutely great conversation for my listeners? So you're so welcome to the podcast today.
Oh, thank you, Aoife. I'm happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
Brilliant. Would you like to give listeners a little bit of a flavour of your background and how you got to where you are?
So I am Cali Williams Yost. I'm the CEO and founder of the Flex+Strategy Group. We are a solutions company that helps leaders reimagine how, when, and where work is done. And I have been on a mission for the last 25 years to unlock the potential of organizations and people by helping them execute flexibility in a way that works for the business and for people. So I've been doing this for a very, very long time. I got into it. I originally was a banker when I first got out of college. I went through a bank manager training program, and when you do that, you become a very junior manager very quickly. So I was kind of in training with a group of bankers who were older than I was. I was married, but I didn't have any kids. And I just saw that the lack of flexibility in work was unnecessarily causing the bankers who worked with me to have to quit. And it made
Yeah.
our business vulnerable. I mean, at the time, again, I didn't have kids. Like, I didn't quite understand the personal part of it, but I was just obsessed with the fact that I need to keep these people, because if they leave, then I got to figure out how to cover all these accounts.
Yeah.
And all they want is like one day home or a little bit fewer hours. And my customers didn't care. I'm like, they just wanted their banker. So I just thought this made so much sense.
Yeah. And it
This
does.
is the naivete of youth, right? I was probably 28. I had no idea. And went to my management, and just they didn't even know what I was talking about, because there wasn't even mobile phones, laptops,
Yeah.
email, it was just crazy. So I realized that this was actually something people were starting to look at and talk about. And so I just decided, you know what, this is the future, and I'm going to go and be part of this. And so I quit. I went to Columbia Business School. I walked in the doors of Columbia Business School in 1993 saying I'm going to be a work flexibility strategist.
Yeah. Wow.
And yeah, it all worked out. And I have since then been very fortunate to have seen all the phases, all the changes in this field, and have learned what works. I've learned what doesn't work. And probably for the last 10 years, I've had the privilege of really working with forward-thinking leaders who saw what was coming, who got it, who recognized that they needed to actually look at flexibility as a way of operating their organizations. It wasn't just a policy, it wasn't just a program. So when the pandemic hit, those organizations pivoted really quickly, because flexibility was just how they ran their business. So now I'm very committed to use that experience now, help leaders who really on the other side of this are going to have to continue to make flexibility just the way they operate every day.
Yeah.
Um, Help them navigate what really is a complex system of change. There are a lot of pieces to this, and I feel very fortunate that I understand what those pieces are, and I can help organizations navigate through that. Because what makes me excited and happier at work, people ask me, how do you do this for 25 years and still get so excited about it? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I live for the spark. I
Yeah.
live for the spark when a leader in an organization understands that this is just not hassle. Actually, if we do this right, we our business is better, our people are better, and wow,
Mm.
isn't that great? And it just starts a whole loop of ongoing innovation and experimentation that really does take the business to the next level. So I'm excited for the potential on the other side of the pandemic. I think we have to get through this horrible situation. But on the other side, there really is so much we can learn and leverage to
Yeah.
even be better. And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
that's where
I
I am
mean,
now.
there's so much to dive into just based on what you said there. I love this concept of the forward thinking leaders, and I have maybe a bit of a tough question for you now, that like what makes a leader forward thinking? Like have you noticed any patterns? How are they similar? How are they different to other leaders?
Well, somebody asked me this recently. I'm really glad they asked me so I have a good answer for you because I hadn't really thought about it. I'm like, well, what made them so different? And really what it was is they saw this was critical for their business. Okay, so they understood that if they were not flexible in the way work was being done, they were not going to get talent. So they already saw that they were either losing talent or they were not getting the talent they wanted because they were not being able to allow people to determine how and where they worked best. And more importantly, and this is the difference pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, for those forward-thinking leaders, they saw it as a differentiator for them. They knew if they offered it, they got the people, and they could often get them for less money because people
Mm.
found so much value in that. But now post-pandemic, I actually believe flexibility is going to just be table stakes. Like if you don't have it, it's really, again, you aren't even in the running.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's the difference. So it was talent, it was usually space, optimizing space. There was a real understanding that if they looked at their true badge data, like where people were actually using workspaces, um, they weren't in the office every day. They were already working remotely. So how do you make that intentional? And then how do you build workspaces so that the collaborative work that tended to happen on site was really effective? And then put the technology in place that would allow for better communication and coordination across different workspaces and places. They just innately understood that their businesses were transforming, they were digitizing, they needed people to think and work differently. So just in general, they made their operating model
Yeah.
dynamic. So
Yeah.
that's the difference, is the forward thinking leaders just understood we're going here and I need to hop on that wagon and make
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
happen. I think there were leaders beforehand who kind of got it, but it wasn't imperative enough that they wanted to
Mm.
go through what they saw as kind of the hassle of making it a reality.
Yeah.
And the pandemic hit, and man, everyone was thrown into pilot. You had no
Exactly.
choice. And so now I think it's really an interesting period where if you are a leader, are you going to now take this moment to go where you needed to go anyway? Or are you going to try to go back? And I want to try to help as many leaders as possible to just say, no, let's keep going
Yeah.
and even get to a better place.
Yeah, yeah, brilliant. I know, I love that approach. And I suppose I'd love to understand more about what happened on in here in Ireland. It was the 12th of March. They made an announcement. I think at the time it was like 2 weeks and we'll flatten the curve. And I think a lot of people were thinking, oh, wow, 2 weeks, that's a long time to be in lockdown. And now here we are over a year later and it's still going on in and out of lockdown. Um, what were the first things that happened? I'm sure you were super busy at that time with people phoning you up saying, how do I do this?
Well, I think initially there was, to your point, okay, it's only going to be 2 weeks. Let's just like see what we can figure out for these next 2 weeks,
Right.
and then we'll come back. Okay. Then it was like,
Everyone's on vacation for the
yeah,
next 2 weeks.
then it was like a month or two. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden it was, okay, so how do we optimize this? Now,
Mm.
I will say the thing that was really important is that I just kept emphasizing, stick with what you have. Like there were all these pushes to sort of adopt new technology and, just stick with the technology you have and master that. And then just try to be really clear about what is expected of people. And now be very collaborative about expectations around accessibility and responsiveness. Like just start with those main things, being clear about priorities, coordinate accessibility and responsiveness expectations, and leverage the technology you have. Try to learn that. Just stick with those basics, keep it simple. Okay. And I think that's where a lot of organizations started. I think it was just this like rapid kind of response and just diving in and doing it and getting rid of. I have one client who delivered a training to their customers. Usually it takes like months to
Yeah.
deliver a training, right? Because their customers were under a lot of pressure. So they actually executed a whole training curriculum in like 2 weeks during this
Wow.
period of time, because they got rid of all of the layers and the approvals and so it really was a remarkable period of innovation and change and teamwork and collaboration. And so I think what happened was they kind of just survived, right? And then maybe 6 months ago, there was sort of this shift into kind of sustaining, just kind of continuing to sustain where we are.
Mm.
And what I think now organizations are starting to do is to say, okay, how do we want to evolve from all this?
Yeah.
How are we going to rebuild on the other side? So, it forced a change that a lot of organizations and leaders thought could not happen.
Yes,
And
absolutely. Yeah.
now they see it can.
Mm.
So it's going to be interesting to see where they go with that.
Yeah. Before we kind of talk about the future and what that might look like, I'd love to understand more about the barriers that you perceive exist, which may also impact on how we look into the future.
So, I think the barriers that still exist are a couple things. One, not everybody can work remotely. Okay,
Mm.
so we keep talking about this like it's a big remote work conversation.
Yeah.
And it really is a flexible work conversation. So you have to kind of tie it all together. You have to tie together the flexibility that the people who had to basically come on site put in place. So people who still worked on site, they oftentimes adjusted their schedules. They did flexible teaming. They put in, um, space management systems so that they could manage distance across themselves. I mean, all of this is flexibility. It really is. So, how do you look at what happened on site and see that as part of the conversation? How do you look at remote work, but then understand that this hybrid model is really going to still allow people to be on site? Like this fear about how we're going to maintain culture and how we're going to coordinate with each other, it really is just a matter of when people are going to be on site, and that is what most people are telling you they want to do, is to have some degree of on-site presence. How are you leveraging that time? How are you being super intentional about
Mm.
bringing people together? And for those that may be virtual while some people are on site, how do you create effective meeting culture? What technology do you need? How do you have space? How do you have to configure the space so that the virtual people and the on-site people are able to integrate effectively? And then I think some of the barriers are, what do we do with this small percentage? And I estimate it's going to end up being maybe 10 to 15% of the workforce may be full-time remote for a variety of reasons. You may have chosen to hire that person and not have them move. You may have people who their jobs have just, it's become clear their jobs can be done full-time remote and you can save money. I have a client who totally resisted their call center going remote. Everybody was on site in a super expensive building in the middle of
Yeah.
a city. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, this entire call center has worked remotely very well. In fact, even better during the pandemic. So they're going full-time remote. Okay. These
Wow.
people are not coming back on site in this super expensive downtown building. So how do you then manage them within this fully coordinated, flexible, dynamic organization? So the barriers really are getting past this kind of remote, myopic, like right now, yes, but
Yeah.
and then understanding that the hybrid model still will allow a lot of the on-site presence that you're worried about losing. So just now start thinking about how you're going to use that.
Mm.
And this full-time remote group, how do you make sure you're integrating that into these other elements of your workplace? And once you do that, you can begin to see all the elements that have to align in order to execute that new model.
Yeah, I mean, so many different elements, and I know before we kind of started recording, and you were wondering like what would be interesting to cover today. This hybrid working model, I think, is super interesting. About, you know, to me, that is the future, and you're so right in saying it's everyone perceives this as remote working, but actually, what we've been doing at the moment is not really real remote working. It's it's homeschooling, and we can't see our friends, and it's a very, very different scenario than what a normal remote working setup would be. So now that we've kind of talked about some of the barriers, what would you see as the opportunities then for organizations? So I mean, I don't want to put any timelines on it, but maybe let's talk about 2022, so that we're not kind of bringing it too far forward. But let's hope and let's assume that by 2022 that things, and I hate using the word back to normal, but that things will resume, and we will have the option at least to go back to working in offices.
Mm-hmm. So I think there are two phases to look at this in, right? The phase that we're in, at least over here, a little bit, and it's still not very much, but a tiny little bit, beginning that recalibration back into workspace. And that's going to be a bumpy ride. Okay.
Yeah.
That is going to be right now they're thinking about inviting, quote unquote, air quotes, inviting people who have been vaccinated back into the workspace. Again, that's going to still be really awkward. Like, you're going to have to wear masks, still socially distant. Like, it's not going to be the most effective way of working for a lot of people. So I'm not sure how many people are going to take their employers up on that invitation to come back if they're vaccinated. So that is the beginning. I think that recalibration is going to continue through the end of the year, where it's going to be more and more and more and more can go back in safely. So let's say, to your point, that kind of recalibration period extends to 2022. And then we're on the other side of it. And I'm with you. I don't like going back to normal. It's really going to be this new way of working.
Yeah.
You really embrace, like, you can truly dive in and say, okay, what is this going to look like? How are we going to make this happen? Okay. Without the constraints of safety being so much of a concern. So when that happens, now it's important to remember, this has already happened. Like, there were already organizations doing this pre-pandemic. So I am now telling you what can happen from experience, because I've seen it. Okay. And I think that's also super duper important to emphasize for people. This is not new. This was happening. Okay. Now, to varying degrees in organizations, it wasn't very strategically intentional in most organizations, but there was already a lot of organic flexibility going on. Our research, and I see it's how you asked the question, our research for years has shown almost a third of the workforce said they do most of their work from a remote location, not on site. That's a lot of people. Okay.
Yeah.
And, so everybody wasn't sitting together all the time, every day. Now, the organizations that did this intentionally pre-pandemic chose to reimagine work, chose to make flexibility part of their operating model. Here's some of the things that happened. Now, I'm going to go on and on for literally a couple minutes here, but it truly, this is the way it can all play out. Okay.
Yeah.
People are more productive. Why? Why are they more productive? Well, it's pretty easy, because they're trained to think through what are they trying to get done, and then how, when, and where do they do it best. So if they've got a report they have to focus on, they're going to work remotely and focus on that and get it done, so that when they're in the office, they're not being distracted by everybody trying to talk to them and having meetings that they can't get their focused work done, right? And when they're in the office, they're being super intentional about meeting with the people they have to meet with in order to get their jobs done. So productivity goes up, collaboration goes up, because again, you have to be more intentional with all the people you work with. You're not just walking in the door at the beginning of the day and being like, oh yeah, hey Sam, we should meet. It's like, no, I've contacted Sam, we are meeting, and Sam has contacted me, and I'm being thoughtful about who I have to collaborate with in order to make this succeed. There is a much higher degree of leveraging technology. People, I cannot tell you the underutilization of technology that was happening in organizations pre-pandemic. And now there is such a learning curve. People have moved up, but I still think there's a degree of really figuring out now how to use the tools in a hybrid model, right? That's the next application. Leveraging workspaces. I think workspace now really will have to be designed to support this new way of working. So on-site spaces will have to be set up. And I don't mean just like putting big long desks in and everybody bringing their laptop. I mean, really thoughtfully set up to support collaboration that you want to have happen when people are together in the workplace. You have innovation because you can't work flexibly without just naturally asking the question, why are we doing things this way? I mean,
Yeah.
I can tell you more examples in organizations where a stupid process would have been going on forever. And then all of a sudden you're working flexibly and it's like, wait, why can't we just digitize this? Or why can't we just, that's what you're looking for. You want your organizations to be innovating. You want them to be experimenting with new ways of working, right? And that
Mm.
prompts it. People are more engaged because they have to be. They are, and study after study after study after study has proven this. People give you more when you give them flexibility. They do. They just do because they want it. They want to keep it, so they make it work. The teeny tiny little percentage of people who abuse it, which is what we tend to worry about all the
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
people who are going to abuse it, I always will say, has that person been an extraordinarily high performer for a long period of time? And evidently they're like, no, they're a performance problem. It's like, okay, so that's not the flexibility. Okay,
Yeah.
that's the person. And
Yeah.
again, I like to say when you execute flexibility, it's like the ocean goes out and all of a sudden you see all the stuff at the bottom of the sea that you hadn't seen before. Like you see the people who you thought were really working hard. And you're like, wait a minute,
Uh,
they were just actually showing up every day and sitting in a seat. You know, they
yeah.
actually aren't doing much.
Yeah.
Or you see the person who isn't performing well, just they flounder because they just don't have the competencies to be able to be effective in this new way of working.
Yeah.
So again, it's the good people, which are most of the people, they give you more. And then, you know, again, I'm not going to keep going on, but I could oh, and then we're not even talking about operational resilience, right? So pandemic hits, you got flexibility as part of your operating model. You're pivoting really quickly versus
Yeah.
people who were scrambling. And, you know, lots of people, including Bill Gates, have said, this is not our last pandemic.
Mm.
Okay. I mean, we really all have to wake up to the fact that this might be part of our global warming world that we live in. So you've got to be ready to like make the shift, and that's
Yeah.
operational resilience. And then not again, I'll go back to the talent thing. You just get and keep good people if they have flexibility, because your good people, they've got to have all that replicated wherever they're going to go. And if they have it where you are, they're going to think long and hard about leaving you. And you really can attract terrific people because now post pandemic, it's going to be an expectation. So
Yeah.
if you're offering it, you have that advantage. It allows you to retain people who would otherwise retire. I think this is going to be a big deal. I think you're going to have more and more older workers getting towards retirement, not wanting to retire fully, but you're going to want to keep their expertise. You're going to be able to retain that talent pool as well. You'll be able to source talent beyond your geographic region. And then I don't mean to put this last because it's really close to my heart. So I don't like to lead with it because then we don't think of these other things, but it really does help people fit their work and life together. And it is the smallest thing that means so much to people. Being able to have dinner with their children, being able to go to the gym, being able to, just go for a walk with their dog, or get their hair cut, and all of those things fitting work and life together are meaningful. And I think before the pandemic, we thought work and life were two things. You didn't have to worry about life out of work because that's life and this is work. And we now know it's all part of the same thing. And
Yeah.
that's one of the, and again, I want to emphasize, I only bring that up last because if I were to bring that up first, then we wouldn't hear all these other things that are awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's a big deal.
Mm.
And people in the pandemic were really struggling with boundaries because we didn't put that in place. We didn't train people to know how to be intentional about how their work and life fit together. And that's what I wrote both of my books on, is the skills that individuals need to partner with their employers to fit their work and life together day to day in a flexible, dynamic way, but then also when they need a more formal plan, how to put that together. And when that partnership happens, that shared leadership happens, it's really, really powerful for both the organization and the individual. So I'm going to stop there. But I can warn you, I can go on and on and on. And
But
so
brilliant. So much to dive into. There's a few points that I want to pick up on in particular. And if we kind of touch on those, you mentioned about leveraging technology and that we can actually use it more, better, or more effectively. I'd love to get some tips. You know, what other tools could we use, or is that very unique for each individual organization?
So here's what I think every organization should do. I think there's too much technology a lot of times going on. I think there's not an organization of it. I think there's messages happening in a million places and you
Okay.
haven't landed on your video conferencing system. And so some people are using Teams, some people are using Zoom. I think first we have to just decide. I think first there's to be an inventory of
Yeah.
technology. I think there has to be a clarification of all of the various capabilities of these technologies. Okay. And then I think there has to be an organizational prioritization of what we are using to do what, right?
Yeah.
So, email could be used very specifically. Personally, I think organizations oftentimes tell me they like and use email because it's a way to archive things. You archive email,
Yeah.
so a record of transaction or a record of a conversation that is officially archivable, right?
Yeah.
Then
I'm
more
I'm
like,
really starting to hate email. I have
I
to
know
admit.
it's a
It's
struggle. So I
and
think they're really, yeah,
if you want to archive something, there are other tools and better tools that you can use in order to do that.
exactly. But that's what they say. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's more of an official way to archive a string of a conversation, right? So let's put email over there. We can all talk about, right? So then we have, apps like Slack, right? Which
Yeah.
people love, but is that the optimal way to have a synchronous conversation? These asynchronous and synchronous words, I think, are so complicated for people. It's like, okay, a conversation where I need you to get back to me right away, and a conversation where it doesn't matter. Okay,
Yeah.
synchronous versus synchronous. I think there are tools like Slack where that might be more of a rapid response kind of platform that you would be on, whereas maybe Teams is something where you put a message in and people don't have to get back to you right away, and they can review it
Mm.
when they have the time and respond to it and add to it. And so again, it's picking a lane, right? And asking yourselves, how do we communicate? What do we have to do? And then matching the technology um, to that system. I mean, to that communication need. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
So what are
And I
some,
think,
then there's the technology that's very specific to a particular industry, but I would say those are just there's sort of the work technology,
yeah.
and there's the communication coordination technology. And I find work technologies tend to be very specific to a business. And so that doesn't have as much um, overlap to it. And
Yeah.
it's more these communication and collaboration technologies that I think we're still trying to figure out.
Yeah. And how to optimize them essentially.
Now,
Yeah.
what do
Really.
you
I mean,
when you I'm curious, what do you see as the better way to archive?
well, I was thinking Slack actually, not that I've used it, and I'll be, full disclosure here. I tried to get onto Slack yesterday, and it was such a nightmare because they wanted to send me an email, but I don't have my work emails on my phone. And if I wanted to use Slack on my phone, I had to have, it was just, and then they kept sending emails saying, it looks like you're trying to log in from a new device. And I was like, oh God. Anyway, I'm on it now. I don't fully understand how it works, but I get that other people use it for that stuff. So that's kind of why I would say Slack, as opposed to having a particular way of doing things myself. For me, I would use Google Drive and Microsoft OneNote, and I use Microsoft, what do they call it? OneDrive as well, to archive everything. But again, that's, you know, if you have a bigger team, then maybe that's not ideal to use those kind of tools either.
Yeah, I don't think we use like SharePoint, right, in Microsoft. You can really pull that together pretty interestingly. Like you can archive your conversations in email, you can have your team chats, you can have your shared documents in there, you can have,
Yeah.
but again, I just don't
But
think we're
people just don't know how to
optimized,
utilize it, or
right?
optimize it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I think the next step is with all this, is we kind of have
Yeah.
to step back and say, all right, what makes sense? No,
Yeah, but actually having the breathing space to take that step back and review what you're doing, rather than just, we went into pandemic and we kind of
totally.
ran around and we cobbled things together. Um, Something else that you mentioned was competencies. So some people, obviously there are some people who, exactly as you said, they haven't really been performing, but you didn't know because they were showing up to work every day and they were sitting there. But there's other people then who maybe flounder in this remote or hybrid working environment. What are the kind of competencies that organizations should be looking out for if they want to hire someone who will perform well while they're working in a flexible environment?
All right. So then again, I tend to break things down into two different categories. So first category are the naturals. And I've
Okay.
met people over the years, they always fascinate me. My second book, Tweak It, is my study of the work-life fit naturals. These are the individuals that fit work and life together without even thinking twice about it. And everybody else is floundering. And I thought they are these magical beings. I did not know what they do. So I started studying them thinking it was super complicated, and it really isn't. So that's in my book if you want to read it. I distilled all their secrets down into a system that you can follow, and it's easy. Um,
Brilliant.
anyway, so they do that naturally, and then there are managers who just naturally manage in a flexible, dynamic way. They do not
Okay.
need to be trained. It's just they figured it out. Okay. Then there are the second group, which is most of us, which are people who have no idea how to intentionally and flexibly fit their work and life together,
Mm.
and the managers who have no idea how to lead a flexible work team. And it's not because they can't learn, it's just they just don't intuitively know it, and they have to be trained. Okay. That's the simple thing. And they're good performers. They just have to be trained. Okay. So going forward, the competencies, you don't want to you don't want to, eliminate a good performer who doesn't necessarily have the competencies, because they can be trained. So if you have training in your organization that lays out the competencies, then that takes care of it. So I'm going to tell you what the competencies are, but it's very important to understand many people will not have them, but they can learn them.
Yeah.
And a very rare group of people just have symbiotically figured this out. And so
Yeah.
you don't want to eliminate people because they seem to be struggling a little bit. Train
Yeah.
them.
You can,
If they
yeah,
still can't get it together, then that could be something. Okay.
yeah.
So here are the competencies that, these are high level. They're more, but I'll just give you high level. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the individual. Okay. Because we always start with the poor manager, and managers cannot figure out every single iteration, machination of how, when, and where people are going to work. They can't. That's not their job. Okay. What they need to do is just be very clear with their people. What are the priorities that we are trying to achieve? Okay.
Mm.
Give them the support they need, give them the guidance they need to achieve those priorities. But then it's the individual that has to then decide, given what I am tasked to do, how, when, and where do I do that best within the guardrails that my organization has set for me? Okay.
Mm.
And they decide. Then they then have to be good at reaching out and coordinating with their team and saying, based upon what we now collectively have to do, here's what I'm thinking I'm going to do. Does that work for you? And the team then needs to be trained to coordinate all that together. They
Mm.
have to be ongoingly, in an ongoing way, coordinating expectations around accessibility and responsiveness, right? They have to be trained on how to recalibrate how they're working as a team based upon what it is they're trying to get done. And then managers just have to be really good managers. Like you have to have the basics of good management down, which we
Mm.
don't train managers oftentimes in those good basics. Again, setting clear goals and expectations, giving people um, growth opportunities in their job, holding people accountable, giving them the resources they need. Like all those things are very important. But then on top of that, you have to know how to lead a flexible work team. So what that means is that you know how to motivate across different platforms. It really, a lot of this is communication platform management and knowing how to make sure you're being in touch with people face to face when they are going to be with you, and being able to connect with people virtually, and knowing how to create moments where you are building team camaraderie across different modes of communication and coordination. So a lot of this is just an add-on to those basics of being just a functioning, effective day-to-day manager. Then at the same time, managers need to learn how to be open to experimenting with new ways of working. And that's just a mindset of just being open to growth and testing things out. And, you can be trained to do that. You can be rewarded for doing that. And then the next one is you recalibrate as realities change. You know how to recognize that realities are shifted within your business or a task that your group has to achieve. And you know how to then say, okay, we got to mix this up. Like we've got to now switch around how we're doing things. So taking all that together, you have individuals playing their roles, teams playing their roles, and managers playing their role. All of that is coordinated together in a culture of what I call shared leadership. And that culture of shared leadership is what captures or leverages the technology, the workspace, the time, um, and executes the priorities of the business. So those are the competencies in a really high level nutshell. And again, some people have those in a very natural way. They just were born that way, but that's not everybody. Okay, that's
Mm.
most people not.
Yeah.
So you really, as an organization, now have to say, these are competencies we have to train on, and
Yeah.
we've got to give people the skills to do this well. And that's why people are struggling right now in the pandemic. We got thrown into pilot without any training, any preparation. So on the other side of this is one of the big pieces that can make a huge difference in
Yeah.
the next phase of all of it.
Yeah, is actually train people, and even those people who are maybe a bit reluctant to stay, because I know there are some people who have not really had a pleasant experience of working from home, but maybe it's because they haven't had the correct training, and they're exactly as you described, they're a little bit floundering because they don't really know how to manage themselves when they're working remotely, and they need to get the skills.
Well, I think
Um,
your point, I want to just reemphasize something you said earlier, which is really true, which is this is not the normal remote work
yeah.
experience either.
Mm,
You have people, parents with kids that are still home, no childcare. They're have three people in the same house trying to work remotely at the same
yeah.
time. I do think there are still some best practices that you can test out now, but it's truly going to become even more important again once you're past this initial recalibration phase and you're embracing this new way of working. You just really are going to have to train people to flex across space, place, and time effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you used a very deliberate word throughout the conversation, which was intentional, and I really, really liked that. I picked up on it. It's about making these interactions very intentional, and if you're going into the office, it's to see a specific person, to collaborate with a specific team, whatever that might be. Something else that you mentioned as well, and this has come up on the podcast quite a bit, this concept. Initially we spoke about work-life balance, then we spoke about work-life integration, work-life blend, work-life harmony, and more recently it's been referred to as life harmony, because let's face it, it's not work and life, and exactly as you alluded to earlier, we've realized that it's just one great big thing. And I read something recently that said, going forward, hopefully this will be the case, that we've seen into people's homes, and
Yeah.
we've shown a lot more empathy in our interactions with people, genuinely asking how they are and how their week is going and all of that kind of stuff. And hopefully that will continue when we do go back to whatever this new situation is going to be. But yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, this concept of, I like the term you used, fit. So like fitting work and life together, and how to do that essentially. So just another term to add to the lexicon of the different ways to describe. And really it is just, it's one thing, and it's life.
Well, do you want to hear the story where that came from?
I'd love to hear it.
It's a great story. Okay. So, people think it's it really does. It came from a place of just frustration for me. So remember, I've been doing this forever. So I'm going to tell you, this was 23 years ago because I was pregnant with my first child. Okay.
Yeah.
I remember being super pregnant when this happened. So I was in the office of a senior leader at a global bank, and we were doing early days of flexibility, right? And I was trying to explain to him how when you give your people the flexibility to balance their work and life, they give you more. And there was research that was backing all this up even back then. But okay. And it was funny. I could tell the minute I said the B word, I lost him. And that was
Yeah.
always what happened. The minute I said it in front of a leader, they were just pleasant, but I could tell they were just waiting for me to get out of their office. Right.
Yeah.
So it happened again. And I was like, all right, I am going to get him to understand this because I am telling you. So I just started going on and I was throwing out research and all this. And he goes, okay. He finally stopped me. He goes, okay. Hey, listen, you're working hard right now. So I just want to tell you, he goes, every time you say that balance word, all I hear is work less. Okay. That's all I hear. And
Interesting.
we have got so much work to do here that there is no way that I am going to support something where I'm basically telling all my people to work less. I'm sorry. Maybe that's what we're doing with all this, but I can't support something like that.
Mm.
So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear myself say, it's not about working less. It's about fitting work and life together so that you are able to be your best on and off the job. And he goes, oh, okay, I get it. And all of a sudden, he starts riffing on, yeah, like I fit my work and life together by come in early on Tuesdays to play squash with my friend. And then I leave on this time and I go home early to catch my son's soccer game. And then I travel. So I'm working remotely when I travel. And he goes, and then there's somebody on my team who's going back to get their degree at night, and that's their fit. And then he went on with like for 5 people who work for him. And I'm thinking to myself, what just happened? Okay, like
Yeah.
something very different just happened. And I really
Yeah.
had to like rewind the tape in my head. And it was this word, fit, work-life fit. Because what
Yeah.
happened was nobody's wrong. Everybody has a different work-life fit. I have never heard the same work-life fit twice in all of my years doing this work, never. And because realities are always changing, right? And my realities are completely unique from your realities. And what
Mm.
it does is it allows everybody to be part of the same conversation, right? So this guy who clearly worked all the time, right, could have his work life fit, but also honor the fact that other people in his department have a different one.
Yeah.
And how do we bring all those realities together in a way that works for the business and for each individual, right? And so the reason this is becoming even more important, and where terms like work-life integration to me are the way to describe the reality, but not the solution. Because
Okay.
for many people, work-life integration is the problem. Like they need the boundaries, right?
Yeah.
There are people, and there's research that supports this. It's just not me saying this, okay? There are integrators, there are separators, there are people who like to put it all together, but then separate it. And so you have to find a way to talk about it so that it honors all those different preferences, right? So when you say, hey, kids, we're going for work-life integration, you lose half the people who want to separate it all. They're like, that's
Yeah.
not going to work for me. Okay. And so, and I think things like harmony, and that's the state that you should achieve from
Yeah.
doing, but you've got to actively be managing that. And
Yeah.
that's get to harmony. You got to be fitting your work and life together in a way that works for you and your job.
Yeah.
So that's where work-life fit comes from, but it is proven to be just that little switch. And this is why it's also important. balance does not exist. So
Yes, I
you always
totally
talk about,
100% agree.
right? So you only talk about what you don't have. Okay, I don't have balance. I do not have balance. I cannot find
Mm.
balance. How
I've never met
ever
anyone who said, I
I
have
have it.
such a great balance.
I know, right? And so you can't get to solution from a place of a deficit, right? So what work life fit does is it immediately switches you from what you don't have to what you could have. And you move from problem to solution much more efficiently and effectively. So that's the story of work life fit.
I am particularly interested in that term because I did my master's research last year. Long-time podcast listeners will know the story of this, but I researched person environment fit.
Oh,
And
oh,
yeah, I'm
okay.
hugely interested in this concept of fit and fitting in at work and what drives that sense of fit. And this is specific to work as opposed to work-life fit. But this is, I
Same.
mean, this is
Oh,
music to my ears, and I'm going to
yeah.
go and do some research on that because yeah, it's all kind of slotting together nicely. But one of the key drivers of that sense of fit and belonging in work was autonomy, our satisfaction of the need for autonomy, of which flexibility is a huge driver. So it sort of all ties in very, very nicely for me, given that I have done that research, that background. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's very,
brilliant.
yes, that's great. And one of the other powerful things that I discovered, which is why then I wrote Tweak It, right? So the first book I wrote was about the formal plan, like the
Yeah,
formal reset, like, oh, I got to formally reset my work life fit. I got to change. Officially, I'm working remotely 2 days a week, or officially, I'm changing my hours, or officially,
yeah,
because I thought that's what people needed help with, right? So I go out, promote this book, and people are like, "Oh, that's great, but I can't even, go see my friend, or I can't." And I realized it were these really small things that people wanted. It was just these
yeah,
tweaks, these little tweaks, that small shifts in how, when, and where you're working based upon what it is you're trying to get done. And so that's when I started studying the naturals and saying, what are they doing that they,
yeah,
really is true that it's the smallest things that mean the biggest difference to people, and that
mm,
flexibility people want. Leaders, I think pre-pandemic at least, were just thought it was like this big crazy change, people wanted it. I'm like, man, I'm gonna tell you right now, it's just being able to come in like 15 minutes later in the morning because you want to go to yoga class,
yeah,
or you just want to take an extra half hour to walk at lunch. That's the kind of flexibility people that's what they're looking for.
yeah,
And so you realize if it's that small, then the return you get from supporting that is really, it's really important and powerful. And now that we're even thinking about intentionally creating these hybrid models,
mm,
imagine if people are trained to learn how to capture that and use it, all they're going to be able to do better and more effectively at work, but then also in their personal lives too, and how much that will benefit everybody. It's
yeah,
really exciting.
yeah, yeah. No, no arguments from me
I know,
whatsoever. Love this
I know.
concept. Um, so the question I ask everyone who comes on the podcast, Callie, what makes you happier at work? And you kind of touched on it earlier, but I'd love you to kind of bring a synopsis to it.
So what makes me happier at work? Okay, as you can already tell, I love what I do. So I
Yes.
can't get actually much happier at work. What would make me happier at work is when I told you, it's really the spark, is when I
Mm,
get another leader, or am able to work with another person to help them understand how they shouldn't fear flexibility. They should really embrace it with strategic, thoughtful intention. Again, that word.
yeah.
What can come out of it? And it's not going to be perfect. It's not a nirvana situation, but not being flexible is much worse than
Yeah.
trying to put the parameters and guardrails in place that do allow work to get done in a creative, flexible way. That makes me happier when I see somebody get the lights go off and see, oh, you
Yeah.
know what, that is true.
I get it. Brilliant. And if people want to reach out, if they want to connect and find out more about what you do, feel free to talk about your books as well.
Okay, so I have two books, which is Work Plus Life, Finding the Fit That's Right for You, and Tweak It, Make What Matters Happen to You Every Day. Work Plus Life is the formal plan, how to,
Yeah.
and Tweak It is the day-to-day informal flexibility how to. So to take them together, you got the Tweaks and Resets handbook for individuals on your own, but even
Yeah.
employees, the skills they need to be effective in a flexible work environment. In terms of connecting, go to our website, flexstrategygroup.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can connect to me there. Twitter, I'm on Twitter. I may dive into, oh gosh, what's that new one? Clubhouse.
Oh,
I
yeah.
yeah, I'm debating.
I'm there.
Are you on there? I went in recently with a friend who was presenting, and I thought I could just watch, and I didn't realize they know you're in the room. So they call me up to the stage, and I didn't even have it connected to my phone, my microphone. I was like, oh goodness, okay. So now I've done that. So I feel like I could be on
You
Clubhouse.
can go again.
I could go again. Yeah, so that's how we can connect, and I look forward to doing so.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today. I'm conscious that we've been talking for quite a long time, but I genuinely could continue this conversation for hours. I'm seeing a lot of synergies, a lot of synchronicities, and things like that in the conversation. So really, really appreciate your time today. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. It was my pleasure. And my goal is to get to Ireland and to see everybody in person.
Whenever we can.
I know,
This is
right?
it,
Let's
isn't it?
hope soon. So hope
Yeah.
soon. Stay safe and healthy.
Yes, you too. Thank you so
All right.
much. See you
Take care.
now. Bye bye.